Yo, good morning. Welcome to the Stochastic.com NBA Strategy Show, March 10th. A little 7-game action. 1 hour window for locks as well. 6 to 7 o'clock. That's it. They lopped this 9:40 game off of it. So that's what we're talking about today. Glad to have you guys with us. You should be elsewhere. You should be at church. But in the event that you're not, take a single second, atone for your sins here this morning and hit that thumbs up. It's the least you can do on a Sunday morning to make things right with the world. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. Dave Loughran with me, DKDFS. First time we've ever done a show together. We've run in the same circles for quite a bit some time now. But joining me, no Josh today, on the Sunday Strategy Show, coming fresh off a $35,000 win on Friday. What's up, brother?
Yeah, man, it's good to do a show with you. Excited to be here. Excited to talk some DFS, and hopefully it can be another good luck charm. Had a great day on Friday, and let's see if we can repeat it on Sunday.
Yeah, so a couple things here. One, I'm producing this. We're self-produced today, so don't expect any bells and whistles. Second, we just got an ownership update. We just got the Sims update. It's only a 7-game slate, but dude, there's a lot of relevant injury news right now. Once again, we're dealing with the Memphis Grizzlies, so that's another situation that we have to pay attention to. Some of these other teams we know, like Miami, there's not a ton to get into there. Jalen Johnson is out for Atlanta. Just looking through some of these injuries and some of the guys that we like, Philly, we already know Maxi's out. I think Memphis is one of them. Cleveland, everybody's out. Strus, Mobley, Donovan Mitchell. The only other one that's interesting right now, and maybe you have a couple others that we can dig into, but the Orlando situation with Jalen Suggs and Markelle Fultz questionable. Anthony Black started last game, had like 22 minutes and had 2 fantasy points on the day.
Yeah, that's Anthony Black for you. But if both those guys are out, we could have some value. I think Cole Anthony would be interesting at 4.7. Gary Harris 4.1. I hate playing Magic value because like they just always run a deep rotation. But if those two guys are out, unfortunately, we're gonna have to consider some guys.
We will. And look, the one advantage here is you're going up against a Pacers team that plays at one of the fastest paces, has one of the worst defenses. Like when you get to Orlando and some of these against slower opponents that have decent enough defenses, these games become unbearable. I think last game they played, I'm pretty sure that in 98-74 between them and the Knicks. Dude.
Was that the final?
They scored 74 points, DK.
I feel like that's like a high school game almost.
Yeah, 98 to. I saw that. I was like, that can't be accurate. It was. They scored 74 points in the game. So we got a lot to get into. What's that?
I feel like that's got to be like one of the lowest scoring like from an NBA team that we've seen in like forever. Like I don't remember last time we've seen some team score sub 80 points.
It's remarkable. They scored. They scored. Listen to this. They scored 23 in the first, 16 in the second, 15 in the third, and 20 in the fourth. Yeah. Held their opponent under 100 too. Anyway, let's get into this. We can throw the Sims up here on the screen as well. I know many of you had taken advantage of some of the recent promos we had and kind of dug into this a little bit. Sims Tool been running hot for a lot of people lately. Specifically Dave Oliver. I don't know if he's watching, but the Elway's Army, dude, every single day, him and Sean Geezy just taking down tournaments left and right, even in lower stake stuff. So it's great to see. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The Guru said unders are 19-0 the last 2 Sundays. And I think 26-3-1 since February 4th on Sunday. Is that right?
The unders have been hitting a ton, I know, since returning from All-Star break. I know there's one day where there's like 10 or 11 games and every single under hit. So
that is insane.
It's been pretty crazy since returning from break, the unders. Like, I don't know what the percent hit rate is, but it's been wild.
I mean, it's reminiscent of, I know you're locked in on football, but remember the primetime unders all year? And then it just flopped. It just flipped. But there was a time where I think it was Thursday night football unders were like 14-1 to the under going into week 16 or something.
Yeah, I do remember that stretch of primetime games where it was like 90% of the time the unders was hitting.
Yeah, and then I got in early on Patriots Steelers under 34. It closed at like 28, and
Mhm.
I think they went over in the first half. So that's football, man. All
That's
right.
how it always happens.
Dude. The thing is, when you know you're getting like 5-6 points of closing line value on a total in a football game that was already low, you've already lost.
Yeah,
Like,
you're just like chalking it up to a L,
yep,
chalking it up to an L no matter what.
yeah, 100%. You've already lost. All right, let's
Yep.
get into this one. We'll kick it off with the and as always, guys, happy to have you with us. Leave a comment down below if you're listening or watching after the fact. We read and respond to all of them. And don't forget, if you like don't have I have YouTube Premium. I use it often. I like my podcast. I turn the phone off. I put it in my pocket as I'm doing stuff, ad free, and you can listen with the screen off. But if you don't have YouTube Premium and you just want to do stuff and listen with your phone off and skip ads and stuff, we're in podcast form. Anything that has shelf life. So like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is you listen, you can check it out there. That'll get uploaded straight after the fact. All right, let's get into this. Houston in Sacramento. So you already saw the ownership, DK. I know a lot of people that use our tools have looked at ownership already. There's a few spots today, like Miami against Washington, some of these Cleveland players with Strus, Mitchell, and Mobley out. That's going to kind of dominate ownership up top. I think we're going to get a bunch of games, though, where we're just not pulling ownership whatsoever. Houston, Amon Thompson's getting a little bit. Cam Whitmore's getting a little bit here. And then on the other side of this one with Sacramento, mind you, it's a 233.5 total. You have Malik Monk getting 12%. Outside of that, everyone's in the single digits, which is funny too, because there's not a lot of high priced options on this slate, but Sabonis still only pulling 9%.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised, at least on the Houston side, that the two highest owned plays right now are Thompson and Whitmore. I think Şengün and Van Fleet are pretty interesting plays at their respective price points. You got 9.3K for Şengün, 7.6K for Van Fleet. Like, these are the two guys running the show offensively. Şengün's been on a tear recently. Like, last game against Portland was a bit of a blowout, but still for 40 plus fancy points. The game before that, 74, 83. Sabonis is not someone you're going to be scared of defensively. So, the price has come up on Şengün, but also, again, the minutes have been very solid. He's been playing extremely well. So he's firmly in play for me. Van Fleet, 7.6K. You're always going to expect close to 40 minutes from him. A little up-tempo game here against the Kings. So he looks pretty good. Not as high in Jalen Green at 7.2K because his price has come to a point where I think it's a little bit tougher to prioritize him when he's close enough in price to Van Fleet. I would just lean Van Fleet. Jabari Smith's minutes have been pretty solid of late. Played 39 minutes in the most recent game, 37 and 37. So 3 of the last 5 games he's played, close to 40 minutes. But the two guys getting the most ownership is what we talked about, right? It's Amen Thompson and it's Cam Whitmore. Not a ton of amazing value right now. More value could open up as we go throughout the day, but Thompson is a good point per minute guy. Played 26 minutes in the most recent game. I think you're probably going to expect somewhere around high teens minutes from him. Whitmore is a guy that can put the ball in the bucket, obviously 20, 24, and 24 minutes over the last 3 games. So those two are interesting, but I think right now, looking at ownership, I think the two main guys, Şengün and Van Fleet, are probably my 2 favorite plays.
Yeah, the thing about Thompson is there's just no way that you can realistically project him for 26 minutes again. Like Dylan Brooks played 21 minutes in that last game. All of these guys lost a minute or two to a blowout in the end. Not even a blowout. They came back late. But it looks like if you're just looking at the game flow here, Amon Thompson played 17 straight minutes to close out the game. He was playing well. They stuck with some of the same guys, right? Like they stuck with Jabari Smith. They stuck with Thompson. There's just no way you can look at him and realistically go, yeah, okay, he had a good game, but now he's going to play 26 minutes again.
Yeah, Dylan Brooks only played 21 minutes in the game. Looks like he got benched. That was the first game Brooks played sub 30 minutes in a long time. Looks like since returning from break. So, yeah, I don't think you can expect that type of run again from Thompson. But here's the thing, he is a good point per minute player. So if he ever finds his way in a few extra minutes, he could smash like he did last game. I just think the last game was definitely an outlier, but I mean, like what, 16, 8, 3, 5 blocks and 2 steals. Like he is a stat sheet stuffer. So, yeah, I think he's firmly in play, but probably going a little bit overowned right now.
Yeah, I mean the 7 stocks is hard to come by.
No,
right?
Yeah, you can't expect that again.
And he's not a bad playmaker, but if his minutes come at the expense of Dylan Brooks, it means he's still playing a lot alongside Fred VanVleet, and that doesn't help all that much. But what about on the Sacramento side? Like I said, one of the higher totals on this slate, De'Aaron Fox's price has come up finally. I mean, he's been on a tear recently. He started the season off really struggling, but now you're seeing it. Like just looking at fantasy point production for a second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 7 of his last 8, he's gone 50 plus on DraftKings. Like he's playing remarkably well. The usage is through the roof. 32 field goal attempts in back-to-back games. But now the question is, how do you prioritize him against guys like, Sabonis, SGA? I know different positions, but just talking similar price points. DeJounte Murray with no Trae Young, no Jalen Johnson either. Brunson against Philly in a 210 total game. There's not a lot of guys all the way up top, but you have a lot of that 9K range in there.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Fox has been playing extremely well. The price point has come up. Like he was in the low 8K range. It feels like for a while. Now he's 9.2. But here's the thing. Like the Kings, they run a pretty tight rotation. Like you're going to get big minutes for these main guys. I think in a competitive game, you should expect high 30s minutes for De'Aaron Fox. Sabonis, one of my favorite players in the NBA. His price is up a bit, so it's a little bit tougher to get to him, but you should still expect close to 40 minutes from him as well. So those are the two that are going to run the show offensively. But I think Malik Monk at 6.7K also pretty interesting. Like his minutes have been solid of late. Usually the Kings will go with a hot hand with like Monk and Murray and Herter and Barnes. Like one of those guys is going to get their minutes slashed. Recently, it's been Herter and Barnes, and like Monk is a good point per minute guy. So if you give him like around 30 minutes, he's going to stand out as a solid play, even though his price has come up. And he has nice eligibility too. Shooting guard, small forward, so it's easier to get him into your lineups. Keegan Murray, he's playing pretty good minutes of late. The last 5 games he's played 30 plus minutes. So I think Monk, Murray, pretty interesting options. As far as the top end guys go, I think it's easier to get to Fox at 9.2 than it is Sabonis at 10.8K. Also, Sabonis only center eligible, so opportunity cost is a bit higher to get him into your lineups. But those are the main guys I'll look to. And then I think Trey Lyles is a little bit interesting too at 3.8K. He's been playing like around 20 minutes a game. And again, value is not amazing right now. We could have more value opening up throughout the day. But if you give Trey Lyles around 20 minutes, he's going to stand out as a decent point per dollar value.
Yeah, I'm looking at our first Sims run right here. So I ran the contest generator. I did 30% the first in the pre-contest Sim and 5,000 field. We're getting 16% exposure to Fox right now, and we have him projected around only 7%. So more than 2x the field on Fox right now. I still think this price point, and you mentioned it, this price point still seems reasonable. Not to mention, you look over this last 8-game stretch where he's just completely turned things around, 35% usage, 1.41 DraftKings points per minute. And I think you mentioned it, his playing time is through the roof right now. Like he's played 39 minutes in 3 of his last 4.
Yeah, like you're going to get big minutes guaranteed. Unless something really weird happens, like a blowout or foul trouble, you're going to get like probably close to 40 minutes from De'Aaron Fox. So like, even though the price has risen, like it makes sense. It makes sense why the price is coming up. Like the production's there, the minutes are there. Like I think right now, at least Fox is sub 10% owned. Like he stands as a pretty good tournament play.
Ready to get into this Wizards team?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Let's do it. Starting center Kyle Kuzma. We got to do it. So let's do it. Wizards are 11-point road dogs against Miami, 229-point total here. Miami's where things get really interesting. Kyle Kuzma has been in pretty good spots recently. There's no doubt about that. You look at some of the most recent matchups, but dude, this is a tough spot for a guy like Kuzma. I'm not surprised at all that now that he's 8,300, he's getting a matchup against Bam, against the Miami front court that does a good job at limiting bigs. This guy's not even a big, but with Marvin Bagley out, I mean, the assumption, I think the assumption would be that he starts at the 5 again, right?
Well, so there's been 2 games since Bagley's been out. The first game they started Kuzma at the 5. In the most recent game, they did go to Richaun Holmes at the 5, and he played 36 minutes. So I think against Miami, my guess is they go Holmes at the 5.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. So if that's the case, if they start Richaun Holmes again at the 5, even though the prices come up, I think he's still going to stand out as a pretty good value. Because Holmes is about like a fantasy point per minute player. Again, he played 36 minutes in the most recent game. So even though the matchup's not the best, I think Holmes will stand out as a pretty good value. You mentioned Kuzma. Since returning from break, let's see. Kuzma is a 1.22 fantasy point per minute player. Again, really, really bad matchup here against Miami, but you should get probably mid-30s minutes from him, assuming the game does stay competitive. But right now, I think Holmes is probably my favorite play on Washington. That's assuming that he starts. And then we got to talk about Jordan Poole, too. His usage has been way up. Like, he's been a completely different player since he's come back, since moving to the bench. Like, this is the Jordan Poole that we all expected when he went to Washington. And 6.5K, sure, the prices come up, but also the minutes have been very, very solid for him. Usage has been good. Assist numbers have been good. So right now, Jordan Poole is hovering around 10%. I think even in a tough matchup, you got to have some interest in him. But I think Holmes is probably the standout play for me right now in Washington.
What about Denny Avdia? The price point is definitely not cheap as it used to be, but the guy, I mean, look, he's rebounding at an insane clip right now. Usage isn't crazy, but you're seeing decent amount of opportunities, huge minutes. I mean, if he's out there and this game is even remotely competitive, you're getting 35 minutes from him. We're right around the field on him. The only thing to me that stands out that I don't love, I didn't expect him to be around 15% owned on this slate at that price point.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised right now on his ownership. I mean, the price point is up a bit. He's only got small forward eligibility. I mean, the minutes have been solid, 35, 36, and 35. I think I'm a bit underweight or like a bit lighter on him right now. Like if he's going to be 15%, I would rather be underweight to Denny and maybe overweight to some other pieces in Washington. So not as high on Denny, I think, as the field is right now.
Looking at this Holmes, so trying to see who was getting back up 5 minutes in that last game where Holmes played or started.
So Umorie plays a little bit at the back of 5, and then I think they were going to Kuzma. I can bring up the rotation.
That's what I was wondering here. If they went to any Kuzma at the 5, it looks like they did him.
So let's see.
Maybe for like a couple minutes to close out the second quarter.
Yeah, so it looks like Umorie checked in for Holmes, and then at the end of the second quarter, I think they played some small ball. And then Umorie didn't even play in the second half too. He played a little bit in the first half, and that was it. Like Washington ran a pretty tight rotation in their most recent game. Like Anthony Gill played 2 minutes, 6 minutes for Umorie, 7 minutes for Johnny Davis. And then the main rotation players got a majority of the run. Coulibaly, 27 minutes, 35 for Denny, 39 for Kuzma, 36 for Holmes, only 21 for Tyus Jones, 34 for Poole, and 30 for Corey Kispert.
Yeah. My only question here is like with Umorie playing, that is such a difficult name to pronounce. Umorie playing back up 5 minutes. Kuzma, we've seen him start at the 5. So then my only concern becomes like how volatile are Richaun Holmes' minutes in a spot like this? Like even if he starts, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like I think if he starts, you're probably going to feel good about projecting him for at least 20 minutes. Again, I don't think you can expect 36 that he played in the most recent game, but if you do get him starting, like I said, I think at least 20, 25 probably. And at that price point, like it's going to make him stand out as a pretty good play. So Yeah, I think right now he's only he's like 7% owned right now. Yeah, he's the standout play for me.
Look, you know as well as I do too, when you're getting value at the center position, it's so much more valuable than like a $4,700 Kyle Anderson any day of the week. Even in a tough matchup against Miami. But looking at Miami, man, we have if I don't know if you can see it on the screen, DK, but our exposures right now in our first Sims run, of course, things will change throughout the day. They always do as news breaks. Caleb Martin, 69% exposure. Bam, 65. Terry Rozier, 29. Duncan Robinson, 16. Only 9% Jimmy Butler, though. And I favored 150 lineups here. We have Jimmy Butler's ownership significantly higher than the exposure we're getting to him right now in the Sims. But regardless, Miami, just aggregate ownership going to this team is very high today.
Yeah, it's hard to dislike this team, especially with the way that they've been running their rotations of late. Again, no Hero, no Kevin Love. In their most recent game, like you got really solid minutes for their main guys. Rozier played 32 minutes, 36 minutes for Jimmy Butler, 30 minutes for Martin off the bench, 31 minutes for Jaquez. There's a lot of ownership coming to this team right now. Again, 40+% to guys like Bam and Martin, mid 30s for Jimmy Butler, mid 20s for Terry Rozier. I mean, anytime you play the Washington Wizards, like it's just going to be a pretty big benefit to these guys. And the way that Spoelstra's been running their rotations is a big benefit as well. Rozier 2 games ago too played 40 minutes. So you do have that minutes upside for a majority of his time since he's come to Miami. He's kind of hovered in that low 30s minute range, but at least you do see like he has the upside to play more. So I think any of the main 3 guys, Jimmy 8.4, Bam at 8.2, and Rozier at 7K, all look pretty good. If you factor in ownership, again, Rozier right now is the lowest owned guy, but any of those guys I think look pretty good. Duncan Robinson's minutes have also been very solid of late. He's hovering, around 30 minutes last 5 games, 36, 34, 36, 30, and 28. Does have shooting guard, small forward eligibility as well. Jaquez had a huge game last game. I was a bit tilted. He was in the first place lineup. I got second that day, so I was a little bit frustrated because I was like, I didn't even think Jaquez was playable that day, but he had a huge game. He's probably going to play somewhere around 25 to 30 minutes, so he's reasonable as well. Jovic, I believe, started in their most recent game.
Yeah, he started against OKC, played 30 minutes.
Yeah, so usually like Jovic has been starting and playing around 20 minutes, but 30 in the most recent game. I mean, if you told me that Nikola Jovic was going to play 30 minutes again, he would stand out as probably one of the best values in the slate.
Yeah, seriously. Look, that last game against OKC, right? By the way, much tougher, much more difficult matchup than, and I think you mentioned this, than they have today against Washington. If you remove the 20 combined minutes between Haywood Highsmith and Patty Mills, you had 7 guys play 220 of 240 total minutes. Like
that's wild. Also, I didn't even realize Patty Mills, that was his first game with Miami too.
Yeah, he got 16 minutes almost.
Yeah, I didn't even realize he signed a contract a few days ago. Yeah. That's pretty wild. But yeah, like Jovic, he's one of those guys where usually like you can never feel great about his minutes, but like if you get a game like last game, like I said, he's going to stand out as a really, really good value.
By the way, Patty Mills scored 13 points on 5 for 7 shooting in that game.
Hey, that's Patty Mills was a couple of years ago in the Olympics. He was someone that he was like 10. He was one of the most. He was like the highest priced player, and yeah, I was playing him every day too.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. For Australia, like he was playing like 35 minutes a game, and he was just doing everything for the team.
He was the best player on their team. He was the best player on Australia, right? Wasn't
he was more expensive than like Kevin Durant, like the stars for like USA. Like Patty Mills, like the most expensive player.
Well, we've seen this before. I mean, like you go back to the Sixers rebuild, I'll never forget. Like Tony Roten was out there triple doubling every night, and that guy was at no point in his career a competent NBA starter. It didn't matter. They had nobody, and they just played fast. And you see it all the time with like players that aren't good. Look at Memphis. Look at some of the price points on some of these Memphis guys that will never start another game in their career, and they're like $6,800. It's nuts. But man, you have to think that Bam can abuse this Washington front court today, no matter who they throw out there.
Yeah, like whether it's like Holmes or Mourier, or if they try to go small ball, like Bam should be able to have his way. Only played 31 minutes in the most recent game, but I think you're going to expect like high 30s minutes from him, assuming the game stays competitive. So I totally agree with the ownership right now of around 40%. Like it's just a great matchup. So yeah, like Bam, like whether it be Kuzma or Holmes or Mourier, like he's going to feast whenever he's on the court.
I really do think you could make an argument for almost anyone in this, particularly in the starting lineup. But like we have 7 guys pulling ownership. All of them are north of 8%. They're all somewhat viable for sure.
Yeah, like Caleb Martin too. I didn't mention him, but he's 4.5K. He's getting a lot of ownership. He's probably going to play around 30 minutes. I think he stands out right now as one of the better values in the slate. So Miami as a whole at the moment, definitely one of the top teams to target on the slate.
All right, let's keep it going here. Talk about the New Orleans Pelicans going up against Atlanta, 222.5 total. So Pelicans 7-point favorites on the road. We're pulling only 12% ownership to Jose Alvarado, highest owned player here in the Sims. 9% Zion, 7% Larry Nance, 2% Ingram. And then if you're just looking at ownership too, like I mentioned to you guys, if you have the subscription, if you have ownership, if you have any of that NBA Sims package, you already know it's up. But Zion's getting 13%. Alvarado's getting 11%. I mean, it's not the worst matchup against Atlanta. They are 7-point favorites, but this always becomes one of those difficult teams because you've got Zion, you have Brandon Ingram, you have CJ McCollum. All of them are kind of, to some extent, interchangeable from day to day. And then it makes them most of the time just modestly interesting, and none of them really stand out.
Yeah, like this is usually a team that I get to when like one of their main players is out. When they're fully healthy, like
it's tough.
They're viable, but like they're more secondary plays. So I understand the ownership. Again, as you mentioned, like not like Zion right now projected to be the highest owned play, but only about 13%. He's 8.1. I think he's probably my preferred of like the top options with him, Ingram, and CJ. Like I think they can go small ball at times with Zion. Like this team has been reluctant to give JV minutes of late. They've been starting Larry Nance over him in the second half at times. So that is a little bit of a benefit to Zion. You mentioned the matchup against Atlanta. I really like the matchup here. So yeah, like I think Zion of the top 3 would probably be my preferred option. A little bit tougher to get to the bigs, as we talked about with JV, right? 26, 20, and 19 minutes over the last 3 games. I'm just not confident at all with his minutes. They started Nance over him multiple times. Larry Nance at 3.6K, I'll always mention him as a contrarian play because if you do get that game where he starts the second half for JV, he could have a really solid game, like 27 minutes in the most recent game. So he's always interesting to me. Again, he's only getting about 6%, so I think he's a viable GPP play, but a little bit tougher to get to any of the other options like Murphy and Herb Jones. Those are usually guys I get to when like one of Zion or Ingram or CJ are out. When they're fully healthy, they're tougher to prioritize.
Atlanta has no Jalen Johnson for the second straight game, I believe. And
yeah, that's the second game he's been out.
Yeah, and then Trae Young obviously is sidelined. I don't know how much pops up here, and we can dig into this a little bit, but you have DeJounte Murray. We mentioned it at the top. Like with no Jalen Johnson, no Trae Young on the floor this year, 1.4 DraftKings points per minute, 30+%. Just across the board, you're getting really good numbers from him. Bogdanovich is another guy. His per minute production moves up to 1 fantasy point per minute, which, you're not going to complain about that. He's point guard, shooting guard eligible. The question is, can you prioritize these guys today? Because the matchup against New Orleans, it's not great. They don't play at a particularly fast pace. They have a top 10 defense, 111 defensive rating. But hey, Bogdanovich played 35 minutes last game against Memphis as a starter. DeJounte Murray, another one where he's probable to play today. 40 minutes last time out, 39 the game before that. They're just not getting a lot of ownership in this matchup.
Yeah, to be honest, like I don't love the spot, but I'm a little bit surprised that these guys aren't getting a little bit more ownership.
Me too.
You take Jalen Johnson off the court, that's a pretty big bump to guys like Murray and Bogdanovich. Because when Trae Young's been off the court, like Jalen Johnson was far and away the guy that was averaging the second most potential assists in the game per game. And now I think that's going to be Bogdanovich. I mean, you mentioned he's going to play probably mid 30s minutes, 35, 34 minutes over the last couple games. I've lost a lot of money betting on this guy's player props of late, but I think he still stands out as a pretty good option. He's not getting a ton of ownership. 14% is reasonable. So I think he looks pretty good. And then DeJounte Murray, again, he won me a lot of money the other day. Price point went up a little bit, but like he's just going to dominate the usage. He played 40 minutes in the most recent game. In that game too, he had 35% usage rate. So I mean, this team's shorthanded. And you look at like who else is going to be in the rotation. Like Vic Krejci started. He played like just over 20 minutes. Saw a little bit of Wes Matthews, like Garrison Matthews. This team, like they don't have high usage players right now. No Trae Young, no Jalen Johnson. So I would say I'm a bit higher right now on those two guards, Murray and Bogdanovich, than the field. Sadiq Bey was an extremely popular play in the most recent game, and he was a letdown, but he's going to play big minutes. He played 37 minutes in the most recent game. He shot 1 of 12, so I don't think you'd expect that again. He's only getting 7%. I think he stands out as a pretty safe play. And then right now, you're probably going to get a full 48 minutes from Capella and Okongwu. Capella played 27 minutes. Capella played 27 minutes. Sorry, Bruno Fernando played 21 minutes. So I think that the two center plays are also interesting options. You got Capella at 6K and Fernando at 4.5. I think if you factor in salary, it's probably a little bit easier to get to Fernando than Capella. The coach did mention too that DeAndre Hunter is still on a minutes limit. So he's a little bit tougher to prioritize. He's been on a minutes limit for a while too, but 29, 26, 25 minutes in their 3 most recent games. So a little bit tougher to get to him. But yeah, I think the two guards are pretty interesting. And then the center rotation as well with Capella and with Bruno Fernando.
Between these 3 guards, who do you prefer the most? DeJounte Murray, all similar price points. DeJounte Murray, Jalen Brunson, or De'Aaron Fox? I didn't include Halliburton because I would imagine that wouldn't be your answer anyway.
I think if you factor in ownership for me, I think it's got to be DeJounte Murray.
I'm thinking the same thing. I mean, I know it's not a matchup against the Pacers or the Wizards, but I mean, what if he plays another 40 in regulation without Johnson and Trae Young?
Yeah, like you're in a competitive game. I think you're expecting close to that, and it's like I said, you run down like who else is playing minutes for this team. It's like who else is going to do anything besides him and Bogdanovich? Like they just don't have a lot of high usage players right now. So, yeah, I think of those 3 guys, Murray's definitely my preferred option, and yeah, I'm surprised he's not getting more than the 6% currently that he's getting.
Same. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we'll see how this plays out. Maybe ownership changes because we're not getting to a ton of DeJounte Murray in the Sims right now either. But I got to tell you, it looks like a pretty good – like if he's really only going to be – what do we have him at? If 6%?
Yep.
I mean, if it comes closer to lock and he's still sitting sub 10%, starts to look pretty good.
Yeah, like that's going to be a play I'm going to be very high on if this ownership holds.
So where's all the ownership coming in? Let me see something. Where's all the ownership coming in on the expensive players then?
Let's see.
Like Jimmy Butler at 8,400. Outside of that, I just sorted our ownership by salary. None of the highest priced options are coming in even double digits right now.
Yeah, there's no one. Yeah, no one over like. Yeah, Jimmy Butler, like you said, like 8,400 getting the most ownership. Other than that, like above him, no one's getting above 10% right now, which is pretty crazy. But that also goes to show like the value right now. There's not a lot of great value. And if we do get, some more value opening up, I think a lot of these top end guys will get more ownership.
Yeah, I would think so too. They have to. And DeJounte Murray would factor into that as well. All right.
For sure.
Let's go. Next up. By the way, you guys ever want to check the Sims tool out, the lineup generator, you already know, link in the description. to all of that. So whether it's 1 week, 1 month, one sport, all sport, you want to get the big discount in perpetuity, which means it goes on, forever. Rock the stochastic avatar. And if you didn't want the Sims, you just wanted the data package with a light version of the Sims that we toss in there anyway. That's down there too. So no matter what you want, lineup generator, Sims, just the data, ownership, boom, bust, projections, all of our tools on top of that, everything's down there. If you're interested, you know where to find it. All right. So New Orleans and Atlanta, or I'm sorry, Indiana and Orlando. Pacers 1.5 point dogs, 224 point total here. This is a clear pace down spot for the Pacers, big time. I don't really know how you can confidently get to anybody here. I mean, Miles Turner always looks decent at that price point, but he's only getting 2%. Halliburton 4%. I'm still not even remotely convinced that he's fully back from that injury. I don't think he's 100% healthy, and I think it's been reflected in his production. But against this Orlando team, a pretty good defensive team, really slow team. We just saw a 98-74 game last time they played. It's hard to prioritize the Pacers today.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to feel great about anything, especially with the way that Carlisle runs his rotations. I would say probably my preferred option would be Halliburton. He's been struggling a bit of late, as you mentioned. I'm not convinced he's 100% either, but he played 37 minutes. That is pretty appealing. 36 minutes to 3 games ago against the Spurs. So, the price point's reasonable. The matchup's awful, though. So I think Halliburton's like an interesting contrarian play. But, yeah, I mean, there's no one right now getting more than 4% ownership, and that would be Halliburton. It's pretty hard to feel good about anyone. I mean, I'm always going to have a little bit of interest in a guy like Jalen Smith. He's 4K. He's backing up Miles Turner right now, and he is a good point per minute player. Plus, he's got the power forward eligibility. If you get a game where Turner gets in foul trouble, which is definitely possible, or Carlisle just kind of trolls at the rotation, Jalen Smith could benefit. I got 18, 20 minutes in the most recent game. So in the most recent 2 games. So I think he's a bit interesting as a contrarian play. Halliburton because of the minutes. But yeah, I mean, this team is running a deep rotation right now. It's an awful matchup. So agree for the most part with the fact that this team is not getting much love.
The Magic, though, there's some interesting stuff here for sure. Now, first thing I'll point out to you, DK, Franz Wagner, we have 53% exposed. So I favored 150 lineups. We have 53% exposure in this first Sims run to Franz Wagner. Outside of that, 13% Anthony, 13% Wendell Carter Jr. Let me see who we're projecting in and out real quick, just for the sake of doing this.
Okay.
Because Jalen Suggs and Markelle Fultz, my guess is that Fultz does not play. Now, I could be wrong. That's just a guess. But when you tweak your knee and your Markelle Fultz and it happens 2 days ago, I don't know.
Yeah,
like they've already treated him with kid gloves all season.
Right. They've been very cautious, I feel like, Orlando as a team with some of these guys, like with him, with Jonathan Isaac. So I tend to agree with you. Like, I think if he's questionable, I lean more towards he's on the doubtful side right now. Only played 9 minutes in the most recent game. So, I mean, if you get him and you get Jalen Suggs out, unfortunately, we're going to have to consider some of these value plays. It's just like, it's frustrating with the way that Orlando runs their rotation. They run a very deep rotation. You probably will get Anthony Black in the starting lineup if both those guys are out. But Black had like an horrific game in the most 23 minutes and 2 fantasy points.
Yeah.
How is it even possible?
It was, well, I'll tell you how it's possible. They scored 74 points.
Yeah, that's probably why. Yeah.
That's really bad though. I mean, and look, I'm not saying that's going to, you can't, neither you or myself are projecting him for 0.05 fantasy points per minute or whatever it was. But like he had a game earlier this season where he started and was actually pretty productive, but you're not banking on that. The only silver lining is that he's close to minimum salary and it's a really good matchup. Like, to be fair, last matchup against the Knicks is just a brutal, brutal spot. You're talking about a Knicks no excuses for scoring 2 DraftKings points, but it's a Knicks team that plays at the slowest pace in the league. Yeah, slowest pace in the entire league. It's just a terrible, terrible game environment. Well, I'll ask you this. Let's say that Anthony and Fultz are both out, or I'm sorry, Suggs and Fultz are both out. We have to consider Anthony Black, right?
Yeah, we had to consider Anthony Black for sure. I mean, 3.4K, you would probably get somewhere around like 25-ish minutes or so. He's got shooting guard, small forward eligibility. So, not a lot of great value right now. He would be probably one of the better point per dollar values in the slate. And then I think Cole Anthony would stand out too. The Magic have been riding the hot hand with Suggs and with Fultz and with Cole Anthony. But if you take two of those guys out, I feel like you're going to feel pretty good about the minutes for Anthony, 23, 25, and 25 minutes over the last 3 games. So he would probably be my preferred option if those two guys are out. But then you still have to have interest in the top end guys too. Paolo and Franz right now, the only two guys that you should expect big minutes from. Like the Magic, the rotations are a bit tough to nail down. Like those are the only two guys you can feel confident that will close. Last game was a blowout, but Paolo was on pace to play close to 40 minutes. Franz on pace to play high 30s minutes. So in a good matchup, I think those two are also pretty interesting. Right now, ownership's not super high in either, about 16% for Franz, 8% for Paolo. So the two main guys look good. And then, again, if those two guys are out, I think Cole Anthony's going to stand out as a pretty good value.
Yeah, daylight savings already happened?
Yeah, no, it happened last night.
I had no idea.
Yep. I was like, I got to be up in like 6 hours. Great. Oh, now it's 5 hours.
All right. Well, that's good. I'm glad it did because I actually slept pretty well last night. But I woke up, I was like, man, I don't feel like I slept as much as I did. But you don't have any kids, right?
No.
Okay. You have kids that go into daycare, and my oldest is 3. My youngest is going to be 4 months. They go into daycare, and it's like a petri dish of just shit. And the first year, they get sick constantly. And then they just have an iron immune system, and they don't really get sick much after that. But the youngest got sick, and the problem is that you immediately get sick after them as a result. So, dude, it sucks, man. So I'm dealing with a cold over here. We're getting through it. But I did not know it was daylight savings today. So, all right, it's 10:46 on the East Coast. Cool. Would you think Cole Anthony would be if Fultz and Suggs are out? Because Fultz did play last game, but he tweaked that and he only played 9 minutes or so.
Right.
So even that's the thing. Like even with that game, and it was a blowout too. The Knicks were up by a ton of points, 26-point lead midway through the third quarter. That's what makes me wonder. Like there were several minutes from a blowout perspective, like 5 minutes for Caleb Houston. Goga Batadze played 5 minutes at the end to close that game out. Okeke played 3. Schofield played 3. I do wonder, do you think that you could get 30 minutes from Cole Anthony if Suggs and Fultz are both out?
I don't think you would project him for 30, but I think probably you'd feel good about mid-20s. Like he was on pace to play 28 minutes in their most recent game. So he is a good point per minute player. Again, I don't think you would expect 30, but it would definitely be on the table. I think again, he would stand out. He's also got shooting guard eligibility, so it's a bit easier to get him into your lineups. But yeah, I think he would be the standout play for sure if those two guys are out.
Let's talk about Philly and New York. I mean, if we really want to, we have to.
Unfortunately, yeah.
210.5 point total. The Sixers are without Tyrese Maxey. I don't really see the need to get to much here. I mentioned it just a second ago. We're talking about that Knicks Orlando game. New York plays at a crawling pace, super slow pace. Good defensive team, even without OG, even with Randall off the floor. They're still a quality defensive team. On the season, they're still top 10 in defensive rating. I don't see how at these price points you can make an argument for it. The only guy who's been really productive recently is Paul Reed, but then he's in or out of the starting lineup. He's been good for sure. He's a high motor, high energy guy, but he's not a good rim protector. He's not a good defensive player. He's just a high motor guy that can rack up a lot of peripherals. But I mean, at 5,800, I don't feel like playing the guessing game with how many minutes he gets or whether or not he's going to be starting.
Yeah, like he's a typical guy that I like to play at low ownership. And as you mentioned, like the minutes are all over the place. They started Bamba in the most recent game. Like you're never going to feel good about the minutes for Paul Reed, but he is a good point per minute player. Right now, he's only projected for about 1% ownership. So we'll keep an eye on the starting lineup. If he starts, I'd feel a little bit better about his minutes. But yeah, I think he's a pretty interesting tournament play with Embiid and Maxey off the court on the year. You have Paul Reed is actually the best point per minute, 1.33. Tobias Harris is at 1.07. Oubre, 1.02. So, yeah, I think Paul Reed probably the most interesting play here for Philly. It's an awful matchup. I think you can still have some interest in some of the other options as well. Tobias Harris, he's been a little bit up and down. In the most recent game, he had a solid game, though, 39 minutes. Oubre, I believe he started in that most recent game. He did. He started to play 34 minutes. He's always someone that's viable. He's got shooting guard, small forward eligibility. Kyle Lowry's been playing big minutes, 31 minutes in the most recent game. He's a guy that can contribute in a lot of different ways, so the price point is up. So, I mean, there are some options you can consider for Philly, but no one's standing out. Again, awful matchup. I think if Paul Reed starts, he would probably be my favorite play.
He is productive when he's out there. Like you can't take that away from him, man. On a per minute basis, Paul Reed is productive. The problem, and you know what? It hasn't even mattered recently if he starts or not. He's still getting the minutes off the bench, but do you really want the problem is that the upside in minutes isn't there, in my opinion, if he doesn't start. Like if he starts, we've seen him play 30 plus minutes if it's a competitive game. I don't think you get that if he comes off the bench.
Yeah, like I don't think you can expect that. Plus, he's only got center eligibility, so higher opportunity cost to get him in your lineup. But yeah, like I don't think there's a ton else here. I mean, Buddy Hield, they haven't been giving him big minutes. They're not closing with him too, which is surprising because when he first came to Philly, he was averaging close to 40 minutes a game. I think it's really hard to get to him at 6.3. But yeah, like I don't think there's a ton else to mention for this team. Like they're going to run a relatively tight rotation, but it's just such a bad spot here against the Knicks.
It's terrible. And I mean, you're looking at the Knicks too. If there's ever one good thing about the Knicks is that some of these guys Tibbs is just going to give absurd playing time to, and it doesn't matter. Josh Hart's minutes are one of the funniest things in the world. Like he comes out there and every single game, he's just doesn't matter. Have you seen the minutes that he's even in that game, even in that blowout 24-point win over Orlando, he still played 42 minutes. Listen to this: 42, 43, 45, 47, 40, 42, 42, 44. That's since the All-Star break, dude. That's 42 minutes in all but one of them. And the only one that wasn't was 40 minutes in a blowout loss. Those are insane minutes.
Yeah, I mean Thibodeau is a crazy person for playing Josh Hart this much in regular season games. Like he's gonna die, man. He's averaging like 45 minutes a game. I feel like over the last 5 games. I mean he played like almost the entire game against Golden State. So yeah, it's wild. In the most recent game, it was a blowout, but basically played like 8 guys off the bench. I mean starters got good minutes, and then off the bench you saw McBride and Jericho Sims get decent minutes. Right now, the rotation for the bigs is a little bit concerning, but Precious did play 39 minutes in the most recent game. That was a bit surprising because before that, you were kind of getting mid-20s minutes for those 3 bigs. Again, Hart, you're going to get huge minutes from him. Jalen Brunson is 9.4. In a competitive game, I think you expect high 30s minutes from him. I think he's pretty interesting right now, only getting about 7% ownership. I think he's my favorite play on the Knicks. But
who did you say your favorite play was for the Knicks?
I think Brunson.
Brunson, yeah.
Just because he's doing everything for his team, you're going to get big minutes and reasonable price points. So yeah, I think Brunson's probably my preferred option. Hart, safe because the minutes. And then outside of that, I think it's kind of tough to feel confident with anyone else. Again, Achua, 39 minutes, I think was a bit of an outlier because before that, 24, 22, and 26 minutes.
You know what's weird too? Usually when teams get worse, they play faster, right? Because defensive, particularly when they're terrible defensively, Since Embiid went down, the Sixers are 28th in defensive rating. So we know this. They've been terrible. Them, Toronto, Utah over the past 2 months have been garbage, month and a half. But they're playing at the fourth or fifth slowest pace in the league. Philly 97. Their pace is at a 97.3 since Embiid. I really would have thought that they were playing faster, but they're not. So this, it's not even a pace up. I mean, anything's a pace up spot for the Knicks, but it's not a crazy high pace up spot for the Knicks here either.
Yeah, what 211 and a half over under. Well, that's the second lowest on the slate, I believe.
It's bad.
So you're not gonna get a ton of points in this game, most likely. But the one positive and no surprise is, again, tight rotation for the Knicks. So you're gonna get big minutes for a lot of the main guys.
Right. Funny thing is, even if it doesn't stay close, Hart's getting 42 minutes.
Oh, no, yeah, you're it's wild. You got to project him for 40 plus minutes.
You have at this point, you'd probably project him at 40. But if you were, I mentioned this to Josh the other day. If you're projecting this guy at 42, I don't think there's something wrong with that. It's every game.
No. Yeah, you look at the last 5 games: 42 in a blowout, 43, 45, 47. 40 in a massive blowout. I don't unless he gets injured and foul trouble. I think he's playing 40 plus minutes no matter what.
It's literally every game since the All-Star break. He's played 40 plus.
Yep.
Memphis and OKC. All right. Here we go. Memphis Grizzlies on the road, 15-point dogs. So Lamar Stevens right now, we have him around 26% ownership, getting 30% of him in the Sims run. I guess the question now is who are we projecting in and out? I think it's reasonable to say we're projecting John Conchar and Jordan Goodwin out. They're both doubtful, but Luke Kennard's questionable. Gregory Jackson's questionable as well. Are there any, are there any spots here that stand out to you in a big way?
No, I mean, right now the guy getting the most ownership is Lamar Stevens. I think it makes sense because the price point, he's 4.4K. He's been a pretty good point per minute player since coming over to Memphis. In the most recent game, played 29 minutes. He's going to look a little bit better too of those two questionable players, right? It's Kennard and GG Jackson, right? They're both questionable. So yep. I feel like you're going to feel a little bit better about his minutes if those two guys get ruled out. Jaren, no surprise, he's far and away been their highest usage player. He's always someone that I prefer getting to at low ownership as opposed to higher ownership, just because the wide range of outcomes. He's super foul prone. Right now, only getting about 5%. I know there's massive blowout risk and there's downside of Jaren Jackson Jr., but at super low ownership, I think he's a little bit interesting for tournaments. Laravia has also played extremely well of late. He's 5.1 though, so that's kind of an issue, but you're going to feel better about his minutes too. Again, those two questionable players get ruled out. We got to keep an eye on the starting lineup too. Who's this team? Every single game, it's they're switching up who's available, who's in, who's out. Goodwin, he's been out last couple games, and he's in, he's starting, and he's back out again. This team's a headache, so we got to keep an eye on the news for sure. But if those two questionable players are out, I think you could get some decent value plays for Memphis. But yeah, we got to keep an eye on the news, and we got to keep an eye on the injury report. Also, Wenyen Gabriel is on this team now. He's only center eligible, but he played 13 minutes in his first game with the team. So yeah, we could have some value here, but we got to keep an eye on the news.
Yeah, because last game, Conchar and Goodwin start, but Kennard and Jackson were out. So
right.
That's the problem. There's so many moving parts on this team that I don't even know how you can project these starting lineups with all of these injuries every day.
Yeah, it's a headache. That's why I always for Memphis, I always just wait until I see the starting lineup. All right, once I see the starting lineup, then I have a good idea of what I'm going to do. But yeah,
they're not really even a team worth talking about until we get news on these injuries and the starting lineup. And the good thing is we should know, because what's the window here? Yeah, I said it at the top of the show. The 9 o'clock game's not on this. We have there's 4 6 o'clock games and 3 7 o'clock games. We should have we should have a decent indication, unless it's 6:30 and we find out. But I would assume we know a little bit earlier than that. We should at least.
Yeah, like they could be pretty shorthanded too. If those two questionable players are out. So what you got? Jaren, Vince, Aldama, LaRavia, Lamar Stevens. Yeah, they could they might only have like 8-9 guys if those questionable players are out. So we'll keep an eye on it. It is 6:00 Central, so we may or may not get this news before lock. But yeah, a headache team for sure. But we might have some plays here from Memphis depending on what happens.
There are 7 players right now on the active roster that don't have an injury designation.
Okay, so at least one of the questionable players have to play then, right?
Or has to be active.
Yes. Yep.
So like we've seen it before where you just make a guy active and he doesn't play.
Yeah.
Which means that they could legitimately have a 7-man rotation tonight.
Right. Where like, even though they're like massive dogs and it's Oklahoma City and it's like an awful matchup, you would just have to get some Grizzlies in your lineup in that scenario.
Yeah. Think about this for a second. Like okay, so let's just assume that Conchar and who's the other Goodwin are out, right?
Mm-hmm.
That gives us Jaren Jackson, Vince Williams, Santi Aldama, LaRavia, Kennard, Jackson, Stevens, Jemison, and Gabriel. So that would still only be 9. And that's assuming that Kennard and Jackson both play.
Right. And a lot of those guys are bigs too. You got Jemison, Gabriel, Jaren, and Aldama. So I feel like those guards would just have to play good minutes no matter what.
That's a good point. Like,
yeah.
What does the backcourt rotation look like?
Like you're going to get most likely Vince Williams at the point playing huge minutes. And then it's like, they just don't have like Kennard would probably play around high 20s, low 30s, but yeah, they don't have a lot of guards active no matter what. So yeah, I think you would expect big minutes for those guys, especially Vince Williams. Like I think you would project him for like 35 to 37 minutes or something.
The Guru said they signed somebody from G League.
Well, Giroux. Yeah, I did see that.
Dejan Giroux. That would make sense. Yeah, he's right. They did to a 10-day.
Yeah, so he if some of those questionable players are out, he's probably going to play. He's not in the player pool, but he would at least be in the rotation most likely.
To a 10-day hardship contract. That's the Grizzlies season in a nutshell.
You're going to get a lot of those, coming down the stretch here for the NBA. Those hardship 10-day contracts.
Oh my God, yeah, yeah. we're going to have days where you're playing 5 guys from the same team in a single lineup for sure.
100%.
OKC. Let's get into this one a little bit here. So SGA the guy's automatic. He's basically just robotic at this point with the way he produces. Only 7% ownership today. Actually, Chet is getting the most, followed by Lou Dort. Josh Giddey around 9%. What are your thoughts on Chet today at 7,500 in this spot against the Grizzlies?
Yeah, I think he's pretty interesting. The minutes have been solid for Chet. I think you're in a competitive game. You're probably going to get somewhere around like 32 to 34 minutes. The only question is, will this game stay competitive, right? Well, like a 15-point spread. 15-point spread right now. So you have to factor that in. But if the game stays competitive, I think Chet's interesting. Understand why he's getting a little bit of ownership. Josh Giddey is 5.6. Only played 23 minutes in their most recent game, but before that, 32 and 29 minutes. So I think he's a little bit interesting as well. Because you get the game where he plays like high 20s minutes. He is a good point per minute player, and right now he's not getting ownership. So I think Giddey's a little bit interesting as well. Shea, he's just Mr. Consistent. Like every single game, this guy's going to give you like 30 to 34 points, like somewhere in that range. So he's playable, obviously 10.6, but again, you got to factor in the blowout risk. I just don't think I can deal with the headache, like bench rotation that Dagnall's running right now. Like he just rides the hot hand. It's a deep rotation on the bench at least. So don't think I can get to any of those guys, but I think Chet, like any of the main guys, SGA, Chet, Jalen Williams, and Giddey are all playable, but no one that I'm going to go out of my way to prioritize.
All right, let's wrap this one up. By the way, where can they follow you on Twitter? Where can they find your stuff?
Yeah, so DK __ DFS, 2 underscores. You can also find me on YouTube, but just DK DFS for those that are interested.
How did that Paris Hilton thing ever come together?
Yeah, that was it's a wild story. I get asked that a lot. I get asked that a ton. My ex-girlfriend's cousin actually married Paris Hilton. So that was the whole thing. That was her Christmas gift to me, was that shout out on Twitter. So yeah, that's a very common question I get a lot.
So like, do you know her personally? Do you hang out?
Oh yeah, I hung out with her a lot, like probably like 10 to 15 times or so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's crazy.
She's
Where do you live? Where do you live? What state are you in?
I'm in Chicago right now.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, Paris is cool. She's a little quiet in person, but she's cool. Yeah. She wears sunglasses inside a lot, so I was like, yeah, whatever.
It's funny. I saw that. It's always been your pinned tweet. I was like, oh, I got to ask him about this.
No, that's something else. People always ask me that. I'm like, I'm ready to answer.
You have to. Well, I mean, listen, you pinned the tweet, not me, brother. So
Yep.
you're welcoming in the questions.
Right.
Last game here. Before we do though, if you guys are in states where these are available, BetMGM, bet 5, get 150 in bonus bets. Bet 365, bet 5, get 150 in bonus bets. Why do I mention this? Well, the links are in the description to both of these. And when I say it's literally a 2-minute process, you'd be sitting on the can one morning, maybe even today, firing one off, going, why? I feel like I'm wasting my time. Well, don't waste your time. Make something of it. Click the links, put $5 in, takes a minute to verify yourself. You're getting $150 in bonus bets just for depositing 5, depositing 10, betting 5 of that, getting 150. I mention it though, because the North Carolina launch is happening tomorrow. So if any of you watching this show now or after the fact are in North Carolina and you still haven't taken advantage of all of these pre-registration signups, don't miss out, because now in BetMGM, you sign up pre-reg, you're getting $200 in bonus bets in North Carolina without even depositing. You literally just sign up. You register on BetMGM. If you're in North Carolina, $200 in bonus bets. If you're on BetMGM, you sign up and you get $100 in bonus bets. Then, assuming you've deposited 10, bet 5, you get another 200. So that's what, $500 in bonus bets if you're in North Carolina. But you got to do it before pre-reg, because the second half of the money comes in tomorrow when they launch. So check that out. If you're not in North Carolina, all the other states that are available, bet 5, get 150. Links in the description. 21 years or older. If you have a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, man, let's wrap it up. Brooklyn and Cleveland. The Brooklyn Nets today are on the road, 7-point dogs against the still shorthanded Cavs. Dennis Schroeder's getting 17%. We got to ask you though, what has become of Mikal Bridges at this point? Like he's had some kind of golden opportunities to put up, quality performances. You had him against Charlotte, and he got at least some volume up as far as shooting goes. But I mean, against Detroit, the game before that on the 7th, 11 field goal attempts, not getting to the line. His usage, for the most part, has been through the floor. He's had a couple games that kind of buoy that and make it look a little bit more normal than it is, but he's been pretty quiet since the break.
Yeah, don't get me started, this guy. Like I had a really, really good lineup that day against the Pistons, and he played 43 minutes, and like he went for like 0.5 fantasy points per minute. Like I don't know what's been going on with him. He's been really, really bad, but the one positive you got to note for him is the minutes right now. Like 41 against Charlotte, 43 against the Pistons, 38, 39, 39 last 5 games. So you're most likely, if the game stays competitive, you're going to get big minutes from him. But I think it's kind of tough to prioritize him. Right now, the ownership is pretty low. So at 3%, he's definitely playable in tournaments. You mentioned Schroeder. He's getting the most ownership right now at 17%. Keep an eye on Cam Thomas. He played 30 minutes. He was on a limit. Played 30 minutes, though. It is a back-to-back, so maybe they rest him here. If he ends up sitting, like Schroeder look a little bit better. Schroeder himself, like playing big minutes, 39, 38 over the last couple of games. So he feels like a pretty safe option. Nick Claxton is sub 7K. He's probably going to play somewhere around like low to mid 30s minutes, 34 minutes in back-to-back games. He's always a viable option as well. I don't think there's a ton else to mention. I mean, they did run a pretty tight rotation last game. Every starter played 30 plus minutes. Claxton 34, Bridges 40. Dorian Finney-Smith's been playing big minutes too, 37, 38 minutes for Schroeder, 30 minutes for Cam Thomas. So that is the one positive is right now they're running a pretty tight rotation. Jalen Wilson has been the guy off the bench getting the most run. He played 20 minutes in the most recent game. The issue is that he's just not a good point per minute player. He shot 0 of 5 last game, went for sub 10 fancy points. I know there's not a lot of value, but I think it's kind of tough to get to him. But yeah, I think any of the main rotation players are playable. It's a really bad matchup, but I think Schroeder, I agree with the field. I think Schroeder is probably the easiest to get to at that price. Plus he's got the shooting guard eligibility as well.
Yeah. Did you see the total in this game?
I'm guessing it's really low. 207.5. Wow.
207, dude. That's real low. But
yeah, that's gross.
You mentioned this with Memphis. You're like, hey, look, if Memphis is a shorter rotation and it's a tough spot, 15-point dogs, you still have to like some of them. Well, Cleveland's similar. I mean, obviously a better team. They're still favored by 7 in this spot, but 2 very low implied totals for both of these, specifically for Brooklyn. But Mitchell's out, Mobley's out, Max Strus is out. Look, we're just going to have to get to some of these guys. Like Darius Garland, you're just going to have to get to Garland. Now, I know the last game was overtime, but Garland played 39 minutes in regulation. Okoro played 37 minutes in regulation, 41 for Jared Allen. Look at the minutes that these guys played. Garland played, because he didn't even finish overtime. He played 39 in regulation. And I'm wrong about LeVert, by the way. I was looking at Garland, but still, LeVert played off the bench around 30 minutes in regulation. They had 6 guys play almost 30 or more than 30 minutes in regulation. Some of them well over 40 minutes total.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily the best spot. Again, low total, but I think you got to have some interest. You have to have interest in this team with the way that they're going to run their rotation. Again, no Mitchell, no Mobley, no Strus. The game did go to overtime, but I mean, they played like their main guys just a ton of minutes. Like you saw 6 minutes for Damian Jones on the bench, 18 for Merrill, 3 minutes for Craig Porter Jr. Like they gave their main guys a ton of run. I know it went to overtime, but yeah, 42 for Okoro, 32 for Wade, 44 for Garland, 46 for Jared Allen, 35 for Niang, 34 for LeVert. Price points are reasonable. I think Allen is pretty safe in a competitive game. I think you're going to get high 30s minutes from him. He looks good. Right now, he's getting, where's the ownership on Jared Allen? He's getting sub 20%. So, yeah, I think he looks pretty good. Garland and LeVert, they're going to run the show offensively. I mean, Garland's been a frustrating roster recently, but I think you got to have interest in him. Even at this price point, you're going to expect big minutes from him. LeVert, probably the easiest guy to get to with the eligibility. He is getting the most ownership as well, so I agree with that, but he's going to be like that secondary playmaker behind Garland. I'm once again pretty high in Niang at 4.4, 36 minutes in overtime. The game before that, he only played 26 minutes, but he was in foul trouble. Right now, he's like sub 20%, so I think he's interesting as well. Sam Merrill has been really bad over the last couple of games. 0 of 9 and 2 of 9 shooting, so sub 20 minutes in both those games. But he is a guy, he's one of those guys where if he's playing well, they will extend him. So right now he's getting like no ownership. That's a little bit appealing for tournaments because if he plays well, like I would not be surprised if he plays like 25 to 30 minutes. But yeah, any of these main rotation players, Allen, Garland, LeVert, Okoro, Niang, Dean Wade, I think you can make an argument for. And then maybe a little bit interested in Merrill as a contrarian option.
Here's the truth with guys like Wade and Okoro, though. They need those minutes to get there. Like
for sure.
Absolutely need those minutes. And Dean Wade might not get there anyway, but it is a little bit more encouraging to see that Okoro's his usage actually isn't last game. It was through the floor, but you actually see some increase in usage for him recently. These are the type of guys that can go out there and just be ghosts for 40 minutes. So you need like with Jared Allen, it's different. The more minutes, the better, right? Like LeVert and Caris LeVert, Darius Garland, the more minutes, the better. That's great. But man, with guys like Okoro and Wade, you just need as many minutes as possible. However, to your point, And by the way, they were facing a very good defensive team in Minnesota. That game had a 207 total as well, by the way. If you see Porter and Damian Jones play a combined 9.5 minutes and Merrill only plays like 18, 19 minutes, then those minutes are going to be there again. And you kind of just have to bite the bullet on these guys.
Yeah, like it makes sense why they're getting ownership, right? There's just not a lot of great value. Now, again, it could open up, more stuff could open up throughout the day, but it's not fun. Like it's never fun, to be honest, rostering guys like Wade and Okoro. But right now, like I understand why they're getting love. Like they're just going to play big minutes, and there's not a lot of value. So they're awful point per minute, but 4K Dean Wade, 4.9K Okoro. Like these are guys that you have to have interest in, unfortunately, on the slate.
Oh, it's gross. We'll pay attention to this news with Memphis. That's going to be big for sure. Orlando could as well. Appreciate it, man. This was fun. We'll do this again sometime. I don't know when I'll be back on a Sunday strategy show, but 7 up, 7 down. Appreciate you guys hanging out. Again, go follow DK DFS. Check out all of his work as well. Tell them one more time where they can find it before we get out of here, because I know you got some of your people in here already.
Yep. Yeah. So DK __ DFS on Twitter, and then just DK DFS on YouTube. But yeah, appreciate it, guys. Thanks for tuning in. It was great doing the show with you, and hopefully doing it again soon.
Live Before Lock coming up tonight, 6 p.m. lock. We'll see you guys back here for that. Have a good rest of the weekend. Peace.